Hey y'all, welcome back to Still We Persist. My name is Mia and I'm one of the co-hosts for this webcast along with Shina.
I'm China.
Yep, the other co-host. And today we have special guest Sonia
Hi.
Camacho, wow, who will be able to give us some insight and inspiration as we highlight their work as a woman of color in STEM and as they take us through a little bit of their journey. But first, we'd like to give a land acknowledgement. Um, I'm currently at Oregon State University, which is in Corvallis, so I'll be doing the land acknowledgement for that. And Shina, will be giving a land acknowledgement from your base as well?
Yes.
Okay, I'll go ahead and start. So Oregon State University in Corvallis, Oregon, is located within the traditional homelands of the Marys River or Ampanafu Band of Kalapuya. Following the Willamette Valley Treaty of 1855, Kalapuya people were forcibly removed to reservations in Western Oregon. Today, living descendants of these people are a part of the Confederate Tribes of the Grand Ronde Community of Oregon and the Confederate Tribes of the Siletz Indians.
And where I am in the Jeffersontown neighborhood of Louisville, Kentucky, this is the traditional lands of the Osage, the Eastern Band of Cherokee, the Shawnee, the Adena, and the Hopewell peoples. These peoples were removed to Oklahoma forcibly, although a lot of individuals from these nations remain in Kentucky. So I'd like to acknowledge not only that I'm on their lands, but I'm continuing to share lands with them that should belong to them. So thank you for um, allowing us to be guests on this land.
Thanks for that acknowledgement. We will now like to officially introduce our guest. So Sonia is an incoming fourth year student at Oregon State University studying computer science. She has a super helpful YouTube series talking about what it's like to be a woman of color in STEM. I've seen a few episodes, they're really good. And has been in several mentorship slash internship positions. I've also served as a mentor with Sonia and LSAM. And we're just really excited to have you here today, Sonia. Like, I know you do amazing work and
Yeah.
your presence is just so bright. And I think the Aya community will not only be interested, but just be inspired by what you have to say and a little bit about your story. So,
Yeah. Thank you
I,
so much for having me.
Yeah, I guess we'll just get started. And if you want to tell us a little bit about you and how you began your journey in STEM, we'd love to hear about that.
Cool. Yeah. So, hi, everyone. I'm Sonia Camacho. I'm currently a fourth year computer science systems major. I'm also starting my accelerated master's program this year. So, I'm a freshman in my master's program, but a senior in my undergrad program. And yeah, I got into STEM since I was like born because my mom, she actually majored in math, and my sister, she did all the engineering courses in high school, and that's kind of like led me to do that as well. And then my sister went on to do mechanical engineering here at Oregon State. And so when it came time for me to pick what my degree would be in, I had done all the engineering courses and I really liked computer science the best. So I figured I would just stick with it. And then I got to Oregon State, and luckily I had a big sister here and she was in engineering as well. So it made my transition really easy, and I always felt like I kind of belonged. But the moment that she left, because she was a senior when I was a freshman, I kind of realized like how alone I felt, and like that's how other students must feel. And luckily, I was a part of that mentorship program that Mia was talking about, LSAMP, for underrepresented minorities in STEM. But I never took it very seriously because I already had my role model, my mentor. But when she left, that's when I realized like no one looks like me. No one really gets what I'm going through and things like that. So that's kind of how I began to share my story on social media. And I kind of did a full like 180, 360 or whatever it is. And really kind of just turned my life around to start getting involved. And I became a mentor for that program, and just really encouraging everyone else to like go into STEM and that it'll be okay. Just trying to be a big sister for other people here at Oregon State. And through social media, I've been able to, reach more students all over the country. So, yeah.
And how has being a mentor, right? Because I hear you like mention LSAM and then your social media page. How has that changed or how has that impacted you, I suppose?
Yeah. So with LSAMP, it's really cool because in all other years, I've been able to be on campus with my mentees. And we get around like 4 students, and it's from all different STEM groups. And everyone just has such a different background and from such different places. So that's really inspiring to hear different stories. And honestly, my mentees in LSAMP help me sometimes more than I help them. They're like my best friends, even though they're like my kids. We really just are able to connect and kind of grow our little community of underrepresented minorities. And then through social media is where I've like really felt an impact, because I can post online like a video or a picture with like tips about how I study for an interview, or and I try and be real and honest, like, oh, my test didn't go so well, and like having people actually respond to that and be like, hey, that inspired me. And I've actually been able to hop on a few calls with people around the country who go to different schools but like want to talk about their classes and just have that mentorship guidance. And like it's really sometimes I sit back and like in the moment it's so go 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 that you don't really realize what you're doing, but when you sit down and you kind of think like, I'm actually reaching quite a few people. And I used to get recognized on campus from students like, hey, I used to watch you, and I didn't know like what school I was going to go to, and I was like, Oregon State computer science, and you helped me decide to come here. And so like knowing that I actually am helping students, it's like it's amazing. And I always say like it's not about the views or the numbers. Like, so when I get those few messages here and there, it's like, wow, okay, this is why I do my work, and it like motivates me to keep going.
I have a question about your mentorship too. I don't know if you want to keep talking about being a mentor, but personally, there's something that like I would want to know. So I think especially as women of color, when there are so few of us in a field or at a university, we do form like very personal connections, like you were saying, like we can be friends with the people we're mentoring. So I'm wondering how you set boundaries, or if that's something that you think about a lot, especially because you do have such a visible social media presence.
Yeah, so I think it's also my personality, and like just the way that I am as a person is very like I guess I would say I have like a lot of alpha in me. And so one of the particular mentees that I'm thinking about, she and I are super close. But then like we had a meeting a few weeks ago and she like wasn't there or whatever. And you kind of just have to put on mom mode and be like, hey, listen, like I understand that you're younger and you're having fun and this and that. And like we can have fun and everything's great, but I need you to be on top of X, Y, and Z that you're committed to, and we need to talk about your classes. So I think, and I feel I've seen this before, that when people are given the mentorship title, they care a lot about like being like equal with their mentees and like making sure that they're best friends. But it's like you can do that, and I do that, but you have to also have that like parental mode, where you really just kind of you make sure that they know who's in charge. And I know that sounds weird, but like you kind of have to be like, hey, I've gone through your position before, and even though you're having fun and doing great, learn from me, and this is why I'm telling you this. And I think setting that kind of like assertiveness is hard to do for some people, but for me it comes really natural. And so I think that's a way that I kind of go about like setting boundaries, yet still having fun with my mentees.
Yeah, that's really great that you like naturally have that sort of assertiveness, because I don't think all women of color are socialized that way. So
Yeah.
you're kind of a natural mentor.
Thank you. I'm also the daughter of 2 lawyers, so I've always
Oh.
kind of always been bred to be a little on edge, you know?
That explains a lot.
So in your mentorship positions, like what kind of advice are you able to give your mentees, or like what kind of previous experiences have you had that they're able to like see and learn from? So like previous internships or jobs, perhaps, things like that.
Yeah, so I kind of have this story where like freshman year, I did great in school, but I would just always be partying and going out and things like that. And I wasn't involved in any clubs. And I thought, oh, just because I'm passing my classes, like that's what college is. But then sophomore year, after my sister left, and I kind of had that wake up call, that's when I got really involved. And so I always tell any students, I tell them, you know, it's never too late to turn it around. Like many people think that you can't join a club your sophomore year, you can't, you know, start getting involved in certain organizations like LSAMP and things like that. Or if you wanted to do Greek life, I'm not a part of that, but you know, it's never too late to do anything. So I always try and push that. And also failing classes isn't the end of the world, um, and things like that. And then when it comes to getting involved, back to what I was saying, I got involved with a nonprofit called Chick Tech, and I had a summer internship, and I was doing a podcast for diversity and inclusion specialists, which never actually aired because the CEO left the company. But it was an experience and it was a good time. But I also got involved with Chick Tech here in the Willamette Valley area, and we did like a family coding night. And although I'm not getting paid for those positions, and it's not like actual hands-on software engineering like experience, it's still like pushing yourself out of your boundaries and getting that personal experience, I guess. And it's something that I'm passionate about because Chick Tech is for women in STEM and women in technology. So, and I was supposed to have an internship this past summer, but coronavirus. So I really just try and mentor people and tell them, you know, perseverance is everything. I mean, like I'm a senior and I have no actual software engineering position on my resume yet, which is scary, but at the same time, it's not the end of the world because, you know, I have those passion projects that I personally do and that I volunteer with, like Chick Tech and everything. So I really just try and let people know that, like, you know, you may not have X, Y, and Z, and your GPA may not be a 4.0, but like it's going to be okay. Because I think there's just too much of a pressure and a like this perfect image of a college student, and college isn't always glamorous. So I just try and let them know that, you know, you're going to be spending hours and hours studying, and you can go out and you can have fun, but you know, it's all about balance.
Yeah, balance definitely is key. Um, Thanks for sharing about your internship experience. I also saw on one of your latest posts on your YouTube channel that you were interviewing for a job or something like that. Do you
Yeah.
have any updates? Like, what are your next steps that you're looking at?
So right now I'm interviewing. I just finished interviewing at Nike and I will hear back in a week. They called me yesterday and they were like, we'll let you know soon. And then I actually have my final round with Nordstrom tomorrow. And so I'm really into fashion and tech, if I didn't already mention that. Like, I feel like in the future, we're going to be able to walk into dressing rooms and try on clothes without even having to like actually try them on, you know, like we can just walk by a mirror and then we'll be like, okay, I'm a medium or like I'm a small in this. So the future of technology is just like there's so much potential there. So I definitely want to be at a company like Nordstrom, Nike, Macy's, Kohl's, anything like that. So I'm still waiting to hear back. But also an interview tip is never give up, because I actually got rejected by both of these companies last year, but now I'm in the final round for both of them. So, you know, I feel like you can't rule out a company if it doesn't go well the first time. That definitely wasn't my mindset when I first started interviewing, though. Like, I was like, oh, if it didn't go well, like, forget them. I'll never talk to them again. But things change. But yeah, we'll see what happens. I'm planning on just doing an internship this summer, and then after the master's program, which will just only be one more year, then do full-time position. But who knows? Things could change, because obviously things have changed a lot in the past year with coronavirus and everything. Like, we never know what the universe is going to throw at us next.
Yeah, and like you're talking about, you kind of never know like what technology is going to be developed in the next year or so as you keep working. I'm kind of curious. So you talked about how your resume doesn't really have like traditional software engineering positions, but it's very clear to me like you definitely have people skills, like you're a very people oriented person, and STEM is stereotyped as, like, I'm saying this as an engineer, that we are socially inept
Right.
is the stereotype, right? So has your work as somebody who is like really focused on people, has that helped you in like looking for jobs or figuring out what you want to do?
Yeah, 100%. Networking has literally got me to where I am, and I don't even think I'm that far yet. But I think that's a huge thing right now. Is actually Amazon. I met with someone from Amazon last year, and they're like, we're focused on finding more people with social skills. So we opted out 3 of our technical questions for now doing 3 behavioral and only 2 technical, because to them it's important that when they have a meeting, you know, people are actually speaking and being able to communicate and not just being able to do only the work. Because I always tell people, everyone can code. You can teach someone how to code. You can teach someone how to do anything. But if you're not personable and you're not able to hold a conversation and, you know, things like that, then a company is not going to want you. So networking has definitely helped me a ton, as well as kind of turning my networking side into like marketing in my social media. And I'm able to do like on my resume, I have personal projects that I've done with certain hardware and software. And I'm able to be like, hey, I did that. And I also marketed it by making a YouTube video out of it. And I can talk your ear off all day about how I did it and why I did it. So I think people always forget that, you know, practicing your social skills and practicing how to keep a conversation, how to keep eye contact and things like that is so important for STEM and the technical field, really, because like you said, there's so many like stigmas about us and how, you know, we're just little hermit crabs doing our work and like not talking. So yeah, it's definitely helped me a lot.
That just brought up for me, like, you know, sometimes it can be really hard and really intimidating to talk to people, especially like, you know, someone you're trying to get a job from. So like how would you practice those networking skills, or what are like some best practices you have? I know you mentioned eye contact, but I don't know, it's just things maybe in like your daily routine or everything, everyday life you can do.
Hmm. Um, Honestly, I think maybe like sitting down and filming like practice questions. Like, you know, you're always going to get, tell me about yourself, highlight something on your resume, tell me about a time you had a group project and it didn't go well. So I'm so used to vlogging and talking so much that it just, like I said earlier, it just comes natural to me, to see myself on camera, hear myself, and kind of always just be in that like, yeah, just always on camera and things like that, and always ready. So if I weren't that way, I would, you know, you can set up a Zoom call now and you just like kind of force yourself to look at yourself and just pretend like you're having a little mock interview, because right now, especially with all the virtual interviews, it is really scary to see the interviewers and then you in your box, and you're like, okay, am I doing okay? And just having that that everyday kind of practice might help. And I know it seems silly, but honestly, you got to do what works. And I think another thing is just not holding anything back and making sure to be authentic. That was one of the things when I first started, like the very first conference I went to, there was a final 10 minutes networking. And a lot of the other people that I came with were like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to go over there. And I was like, and my mom has always kind of like taught me that when you go somewhere, you work a room, like you just do your rounds, you say hello, you give them your little spiel, because who cares? You know, what if you never see these people again? Well, at least you met them. And I was like, are you kidding me, you guys? And like, we all got up and we all did our rounds. And I actually ended up going to a Google event that night because someone I met at the networking, she was like, you know, like, I love you. And she's actually like one of my favorite mentors ever. And she was like, you're awesome. And I was like, you're awesome. And we ended up going to an event later that night. But it was because I was authentic and I was just not holding anything back. I wasn't scared because what if I never saw her again? Okay, so what? So I think that's something that people really get scared about, like just being themselves when they're talking. It's not, it doesn't have to be a script. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. And I think that is really hard for a lot of us. Like we feel like we have to engage in a very particular way just because like this is a professional event, right? And that kind of makes me wonder, like, so maybe networking isn't comfortable for everybody, but like a lot of us are really used to social media. So what kind of engagement are you getting from your social media audiences?
Um,
I'm
Sorry,
stealing Mia's question here. I apologize.
could you repeat the last half of the question? So the
Yeah,
networking's not for
so
everyone.
right, like I'm kind of comparing how like networking feels versus like you're like very active on social media. So how are people engaging with you on social media?
Yeah, so we actually have quite a few like Latinas in STEM, Latinas in tech, women in tech, women who code and stuff, group chats on Instagram. And that's a very more casual format. So, you know, there was just a conference the other day through Instagram, and there were, you know, really casual calls, but we were still able to network. And I feel like I have a story and a mentor for everything, but I was able to find a woman at Microsoft who's also a Latina, and she and I set up a call, and then we are planning to meet again in 2 months. And I feel like when you're networking, you also have to remember that it's not necessarily about, hi, I'm talking to you because I want to work at your company, but it's, I'm talking to you and I want to understand the field better because you're in a position where I want to be. And it might not be the company I want, but learning, I guess, about the different experiences and different levels is in my head, it's more important. Actually building relationships is more important than just pinging every recruiter trying to, you know, get a gig or whatever. So I think through social media, people, it's a way that people can be really, really relaxed, and also kind of like make their way through, because, you know, if you keep it up, if you keep networking hard enough, you know, if you find a recruiter at Microsoft or just an employee at Microsoft, they could put in a good word for you, and, you know, you don't know how far it could really go, and that's just from like Instagram. So I really encourage people, and you don't have to change your whole like Instagram like I did. Like all my pictures now are only about like STEM and tech and whatever. But, you know, as long as you're posting respectable images, you know, you could reach out and still be in that community of engineers or people in STEM. There's lots of different pages for like certain groups. And once you just join, that's how you're going to be able to meet people. So I think people also miss social media as a form of networking because they are taking it either too seriously or not seriously enough. But you just have to find that normal middle and just kind of use what you have to your advantage and just be curious about others.
Yeah, it's so exciting that we kind of have access to so many different people now that we wouldn't have been able to reach unless we were at a conference or an interview or something like that. So yeah, I really appreciate your advice. Like talking to a professional person is not just about selling yourself. Like you can also get information and form a sort of like mutual relationship.
Yeah, 100%. I know people who, will be talking to professionals about sports, and just from that, they are able to land a position there or an interview there. And it's from having like a natural conversation, and it's not like, let me tell you everything great about me. I hope you'll like me. So it's definitely, but it goes back to like what I said earlier, like being natural, being yourself, just being authentic. But we often forget that. But it's definitely, that's key in my opinion.
Definitely. I hear you like talking a lot about authenticity and how important it is to be yourself. And I think sometimes we, like a lot of us struggle with that. Like it's so easy to put on a mask, you know? So I'm just wondering like how, it's kind of an odd question to be honest, but how do you define authenticity and then how did you come to that for yourself?
Yeah, so I guess something I used to have an issue with was like on a behavioral interview, they would be like, tell me about a time that something didn't go well. And I would be like, I don't know. And I would just like make something up. I'd be like, oh, one time I had a team and the teammate did this. And because I would be telling like this lie, it wasn't a very fluid story. And so one of my good friends, like we talked about it for a while because I was like, I don't know what's like wrong with me. And they're like, well, it's because you're not being true to yourself. Like that's not a true story. And I was like, I know, I just couldn't think fast enough. And they were like, okay, well, let's like make a document with all the like typical behavioral questions and actually sit and think about all the times. And I'm like, once I actually sat and thought about it, I was like, oh wait, I did have this one actual time. And then I'm able to speak on a real experience. And I say that and it sounds weird, but I think it's something that a lot of people have gone through because you're just like asked and you're like, I don't know. So a tip of advice is make a Google Doc with like behavioral questions that you're asked or that you're anticipating to be asked, and just really write out a story for each one of those that's true. And then also like imposter syndrome and stuff like that, overcoming it. It's really hard. I still get it all the time, and it also sounds silly, but positive affirmations really works. Like if you just look at yourself in the mirror and you like say everything you love about yourself, that helps. And then also sometimes I'll just be sitting here and I'll just shut my screens off, and then I'll think about like, because sometimes I'll have this feeling of like, oh, everything I haven't done or everything I can't get done. And it's like, well, if you sit here and think about all the things that you have done and all the great things that you like can do, it's a better mindset. And I feel like oftentimes when I say that to people, they're like, oh, I haven't really done that much cool stuff. Like you started a YouTube and that's cool. And so like, well, everyone's done something cool. You helped on a project and you did something well. So it doesn't have to be like a giant milestone. But keep telling yourself those good accomplishments and just reassuring yourself of like who you are and what position you're in and where you want to be in life really helps. But yeah, I think everyone struggles with authenticity a little bit every day. And I preach about being authentic, but I do have my times where I'm like, like I don't feel the best, or like I'm not being to my full potential and all that. But it's really just about, I think, reassuring yourself and connecting with your community helps a lot. Like when I get these feelings, I'll go to like the Latinas in STEM group chat and just like talk about my day or what I'm feeling. And, someone else who's, been in the industry for 20 years will be like, hey, I felt that all the time in college. Like, you rock. This is how I handled it. And it really just helps. And also talking to like your mentees and your mentors, everyone around you. That's what helps me stay authentic, I think.
I think we have time for like a few more questions. I'm really enjoying talking with you. So, yeah, I hope we can stay on a little bit longer. I was just thinking about how earlier my mind went here that you had said that pretty soon in the tech industry, maybe like someone will walk into a clothing room and be able to try something on without ever having to actually put on the clothes. What is what is a project you'd be like really passionate to work on? Like in, I'm not super familiar with the computer science world, but what is some kind of like creative project you'd be really stoked to work on?
Yeah, so honestly, anything fashion and tech related. I did a personal project right before Corona hit, like over spring break, where I did LED lights sewn onto the back of a leather jacket that I had, and they were like programmable, and I had to like string it in a certain way so that like this giant battery pack would fit in the pocket. It was kind of crazy, but stuff like that really interests me. So I've seen before that they have clothing that will light up a certain way, determined by like your breathing patterns and stuff like that. And if you're stressed, the clothes, like the lights will like do a certain motion. I don't know, stuff like that is really interesting to me, and I have no idea the technology that it uses. I'm not sure if I'm familiar with it at all, but just the idea of like being able to morph technology and fashion together uh, is really inspiring to me, but also practical things like the mirror, or even just things like I had a question in an interview the other day with Nike, and they asked me, like what technology they could use. And I was like, well, reviews are everything. For women, it's like I'm built a certain way that, a medium online may not be a medium that I'm used to because my hips are a certain way compared to someone else. And so we rely so heavily on reviews because I'm 5'2". I'm not going to buy something that someone who's 5'8" said they were like swimming in. So also like developing a technology that will really help, the consumer. And, I think it'd be so cool if like Nike was like, hey, this shirt is actually bigger at the bottom. So a true medium is actually this in this specific shirt. And then if you were able to like upload a photo of you and try it on like on the website, like there's just so many opportunities that the tech and fashion world has that I'm excited to learn more about and hopefully be a part of one day. But also a lot of it right now just kind of seems like, oh yeah, like one day, but I think it's totally doable in the next few years. So we'll see.
I mean, with you on the team, yeah, definitely doable.
We'll see, hopefully.
I think we got time for one more question. Shina, is there anything coming to mind?
Well, I don't want to force you to like talk about your identities if like that's um I do feel like a lot of times when we're talking about our work, we have to talk about how like being a woman of color is relevant. But since our podcast is like an Aya, or our webcast is an Aya production, I'm wondering how like being a woman of color specifically has affected either your work or how you your interpersonal relationships in your jobs.
Yeah, I can't believe I haven't touched on this in the other questions. I guess before I answer this one, a point about authenticity would be reminding yourself that like you're a badass woman in whatever field, or whatever you identify as. But like I feel like being an underrepresented minority because I'm a Latina in computer science, but then even smaller because I'm a Latina woman in computer science. But I use that as like fuel to the fire. Like I take that, and instead of feeling small about it, I try and make that who I am and what I'm about and why I can do all the things I do or have done. So that's my point about authenticity and being a woman of color. And then my experiences, I have luckily never had any sort of microaggressions because of the color of my skin. I've had a million because I'm a woman. And sometimes I'm like, maybe it's also because of the color of my skin, but nothing outright crazy yet. But I think something a lot of people don't understand is that the people in these positions who are older than us and things like that, they're not used to seeing women or women of color in the field or in trying to pursue the field. And so they have these tendencies that they're used to, and maybe they're used to speaking into certain with certain language and certain ways in their group meetings and their group calls, but because you're a woman in there, if you don't feel comfortable, like you should always, speak up and come to the table. I'm on a group project right now. I'm the only girl and I'm the only woman or woman of color on the project. And sometimes the guys will just be talking and like kind of, I just like don't feel the most comfortable. And so I always make sure to kind of assert myself and be like, hi, like that's great that you guys want to talk about that, but we need to talk about this. Or like I let them know if I feel uncomfortable in a certain area. Definitely surround yourself with a good group of friends. Because there's not that many women in computer science, the majority of my friends in my classes and things like that are male, but I've found a great group that sees me as an equal and that I'm capable of doing things. And if I do my work, they're not like, wow, I'm surprised you did that. They're like, okay, yeah, she did what she was assigned, just like you were assigned. So that's kind of how I go about finding like my community on campus and things like that in classes, finding people who believe in you just as much as you believe in them. But yeah, I think I've definitely had issues with like TAs. If I ask a question and I go up with a male partner and we go up and ask a question, and if I speak the question, they'll respond and only look at my male partner. And things like that, I always tell people like interject if that's happening, like interject and be like, okay, yeah, I was just curious because when I asked the question, and like it may seem like being a bitch and stuff like that, but like you have to just push all that aside and kind of realize that you doing these certain things and asserting your dominance is going to help the other generations and the other people learn that this is the new normal of having a woman of color in your class and things like that. And so it's not going to be easy, and it's not easy. It hasn't been easy, but I feel like just, yeah, like I said, like asserting your dominance and making sure that others know that you're capable is really key, because otherwise, you will get walked all over and people just won't learn, but you have to be a part of that learning experience. And sometimes that does suck to have to be the one to teach others, but how are you going to expect it to change for like our children and stuff when they're going through college?
Right. It is so hard to like, be the only woman and the only person of color in a room and stand up for yourself. And you're totally right. Like having that support group, even if you're not directly working with them, can be a huge help because it just validates your experiences of like you're not the only one going through that.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, I think we're getting close to wrapping up. Thank you so much, Sonia, for sharing your experiences in the STEM field and your experiences with mentorship and your internships. I think the IA community will find that like definitely very helpful. I know like I enjoyed hearing about it and I feel like I learned a lot, especially like your points about authenticity. Like that's a stick with me. Um,
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you for having me. And yeah, if you guys want to connect through social media, I'm at Sonia Macho on Instagram and Sonia Camacho on YouTube. If it's STEM related or not, feel free to slide in my DMs and we can talk about school or anything. I feel like I'm an open book. And like you said, Mia, like sometimes these points about authenticity, but you just need to be reminded. So I always love to keep the conversation going and remind each other to like take a break from school and you're doing great. So yeah, let's definitely all connect on social media. And thank you guys so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks. We enjoy it. Okay, until next time on Still We Persist. See you all.